Good morning. Today we are going to look at one of the interesting essays written by Pico Iyer, which is titled In Praise of a Humble Comma. Pico Iyer, otherwise known as Siddharth Pico Raghavan Iyer, was a British-born essayist, novelist, and he is often known for his travel writing. He was a King's Scholar at Eton College and was awarded a congratulatory double first in English literature at Magdalen College at Oxford University, and then he received his second master's in literature at Harvard. In 2017, he was awarded an honorary doctorate by the Chapman University. He taught writing and literature at Harvard before joining Time in 1982 as a writer on world affairs. His major works include Video Night in Kathmandu, The Lady and the Monk, The Global Soul, The Man Within My Head, and he is also a frequent speaker at literary festivals and universities around the world. He has delivered a lot of TED Talks and has twice been a fellow at the World Economic Forum in Davos. He appeared in a commercial for Incredible India in 2007. The essay In Praise of a Humble Comma was published as an article in Times Magazine in 2001. The essay talks about the necessity of punctuation in everyday life and uses a lot of examples and analogies and metaphors. Mainly, the focus is to point out the lack of respect towards the comma and other punctuations like it. And he moves on to say that punctuations are important in our understanding of a writer's tone and meaning, and also to understand what impact it has on culture and the fluidity, and how there would be no meaning in a text without it. It is striking to look at the adjective he gives to comma in the title. It is humble. The reason why he calls comma a humble punctuation is because it is very often neglected. It is a very small sign which can be often ignored by the people. So he decides to praise the humble comma and bring out its relevance. So he starts the essay by saying that the punctuations are like gods. He compares it based on the function. What do gods do? They give and take away breath for those who believe in religion. They believe that gods are the ones who give the breath and they take away the breath when a person dies. Similarly, comma gives time to take a pause. Comma is something which helps you to take a breath. Comma or a full stop is something which helps you to understand the sentence is coming to an end. Similarly, the breath is something which is very rarely acknowledged. We rarely remember the fact that we breathe every second. Just like that, the punctuations are also rarely acknowledged. Even though they provide meaning to the entire sentence, they are very often ignored, and they are not acknowledged. There is a famous analogy that is made to punctuations. This is how it goes. It looks at all the meaningful words in a sentence as a skeleton, and the punctuations as the muscles and everything else that gives shape to that particular sentence. So words alone will not provide a meaning to a sentence. It is only when it is provided with appropriate punctuations, it is only when it is provided with appropriate prepositions that it becomes a complete sentence with meaning. The second comparison is made based on the features. So a comma might look like a slip of a thing, or it might look like a pedant or pedantic, or a person who looks for very minor errors and marks it there. It might look like just a small mark made by a pedant, or it might even look like a blip on the edge of our consciousness. There is any small interruption that happens in our thought process. It might just look like some small interruption that has happened to a particular sentence, or it might even be mistaken for a printer smudge. Okay, it might be neglected because it might look like a small mark because of the printer's error. So based on the features, based on the appearance, comma looks like a slip of thing, or a pedant stick, or a blip on the edge of our consciousness, or a kind of printer's smudge. Then he moves on to look at the functions of punctuation. According to Pico Iyer, punctuation helps to keep up the law and order. They are like the road signs which are placed along the highway. What do road signs do? They indicate when to control a speed. They provide direction. They prevent head-on collisions. Just like that, punctuations also are similar to the road signs. A comma helps you to control the speed. A full stop helps you to control the speed. A semicolon or a hyphen provides direction as to where the sentence is going. Pico Iyer compares punctuations to the traffic signal, the three lights of a traffic signal. He says that a period or a full stop is like a finality of a red light. A period or a full stop indicates that the sentence is coming to an end. So it is like a red light which tells you to stop. The comma is like a flashing yellow light that asks us to slow down. So in the midst of a long sentence, if you find a comma, that tells you to slow down, that tells you to pause, because some other idea might be coming in, or it might be listing out something else. So a comma gives that direction, gives that kind of a direction to slow down or to take a pause. The semicolon is again like a stop sign that tells us to ease gradually to a halt before starting up again. A semicolon is used to join two or more ideas in a sentence. So the part of the sentence which comes before the semicolon and after the semicolon are capable enough to become a single sentence. They are combined together and those ideas are given equal position or a rank. So semicolon is like a stop sign which tells you that some other idea is coming up in that sentence. So based on the functions of punctuation, they can be compared to the traffic signal, the red light and the yellow light and the green light. Pico Iyer moves on to say that punctuation establishes the relationship between people using words. The kind of punctuations that people use when they speak to each other tells you the kind of relationship that they share. You may imagine the kind of speech that you have with your friend or with your teacher or with your parents. The kind of punctuations you might use when you speak with each one of these groups would be different. In order to elaborate on that, he gives two examples of a school teacher and a lover. Pico Iyer says that school teachers exalt punctuations. They give a lot of importance to punctuations. You might have had teachers, or you still have teachers, who say that you need to give appropriate punctuations to make sense of a sentence. He gives gives the name of H.W. Fowler, Henry Watson Fowler, who was a school educator, who said that comma separates the inseparables. So the teachers share that kind of a relationship with the students where they enforce a lot of importance on the use of punctuations. But lovers are not like that. They defy punctuations completely. And to elaborate on that, Pico Iyer uses the example of Gary Gilmore, an American criminal, and says that this person wrote a letter to his girlfriend with no punctuations at all. So Pico Iyer quotes that letter. I quote, "We love each other and belong to each other. Let's don't ever hurt each other, Nicole. Let's don't ever hurt each other." This is a sentence with no punctuations at all used. So lovers defy punctuation because, as H.W. Fowler said, using a comma in between or any other punctuation for that matter might separate the inseparables. So based on the function of punctuation, you understand, or the kind of punctuations you use in a sentence, you understand the kind of relationship that the speaker shares with the listener. He moves on to call punctuation as a civic prop or a pillar that holds a society upright. It is something which gives sense, which gives meaning to a society. And he says that a sentence with no punctuation is like a sink, a dishwashing sink which is piled high with dirty dishes. And then to elaborate on that, he gives the example of the Victorian age and the modern age. If you're familiar with the features of this age, it might be able to understand it better. The Victorian age, the people in the Victorian age gave a lot of importance to external superficialities. They gave a lot of importance to their dressing style. They gave a lot of importance to the use of punctuations, the use of proper sentence structures. And they were aptly called the age of the corset. But the modernists, they threw off this idea completely in their age. For the modernists, they started the revolutions in the modern age. They started revolting against the Victorian age by taking away some of the proprieties that they upheld so high. For example, they decided not to use any kind of punctuation. For example, in James Joyce's Ulysses, there is a character by the name Molly Bloom who spills out all her private thoughts in 36 pages with no punctuations used at all. So that was a kind of revolution that happened in the literature also, where people completely avoided using punctuations to bring out their unbridled feelings. There was another writer, E. Cummings, who decided not to use capital letters in his works. So E. Cummings is usually written with small e, and c. And for the first time, he felt that it was okay to use God with a small letter G in lowercase. So the modern age revolutions happened by completely throwing away these kind of punctuations, and that could be one of the reasons that led to the sense of absurdism in the postmodern age. Punctuation can also be looked at as the signature of cultures. The kind of punctuation each person uses signifies the kind of culture they belong to. He uses the examples of Spaniards and Chinese. Spaniards are the people from Spain. They are so hot-blooded. The kind of expressions they use mark the passion and the urgency in their mind. Caramba, quien sabe. All these are expressions that they use constantly. Caramba meaning, oh no, wow. Quien sabe, which means who knows. So Spaniards very often use these expressions, and that shows the hot-bloodedness and the passion and the urgency. So that signifies the Spanish culture. The impassive Chinese, that's how Pico Iyer calls them. Because the Chinese, they use a lot of ideograms by completely omitting directions. They don't use any kind of punctuations in their writing, and that could be one of the reasons why Chinese are less expression, they show less expression, they are expressionless. That's why he calls them the impassive Chinese. He also moves on to talk about Tom Wolfe, another American journalist who introduced something called new journalism. He was one of the first people who started making use of fictional elements in non-fictional writings. So that was something which was called the new journalism, and that created a different kind of revolution altogether. So the kind of spray paint he used in order to elaborate on his point is something that signifies the culture of the period that he belonged to. Similarly, the communist parties who make use of punctuations in order to show their passion and revolution, that also is something which signifies their culture. Then he moves on to say that punctuations are like the music in the mind, or they are the rhythm of the heart. Because without punctuation, the words just flow without any meaning, without any direction. So it is harmonyless, it is a disharmony with no punctuation. Then he says that punctuations are the notation in the sheet music of our words, because notations in sheet music tells us when to rest, or when to raise our voices, or when to lower our voices. Punctuations help you in doing that. Just like the sheet music, they give directions as to when to raise your voice, or when to pause, or when to complete a sentence, when to take a complete rest. Similarly, punctuation helps in the facial and vocal expressions. It helps both the speaker and the listener to understand the expressions of the face and the voice. That's why Pico Iyer says, I quote him, "Punctuation is the way one bats one's eyes, lowers one's voice, and blushes demurely." Then he says that punctuation gives humans voice and the meaning that lie behind those words. You might have heard of this example, let's eat grandma, with a comma and without a comma, how the meaning changes completely. So, let's eat, grandma means that a child is asking his or her grandma to eat. Let's eat grandma with no comma in between is like a plan that the grandchildren are making to eat their grandmother. So, punctuations provide meaning to the words, and punctuations give sense to the meanings, give sense to the sentences that we utter. Another example that Pico Iyer uses here is that of parents scolding their children. There is a lot of difference between saying, don't do that, do not do that. Which one is more intense? The second one, right? Do not do that. Because that seems to be more intense in tone, that seems to be more serious than don't do that. Similarly, he makes use of the example of Hamlet's famous soliloquy, to be or not to be. That is the question. So Pico Iyer humorously says that if we insert an exclamation mark immediately after to be or not to be, it would turn the gloomy Hamlet into someone who is surprised. So that could be the change of expression that can happen when we change punctuations. Similarly, the expression God save the Queen becomes a desperate cry when you insert a comma in between God and save the Queen. Pico Iyer says that punctuations are also a matter of aesthetics. We use them not only for providing meaning to sentence, but it's also something which makes writing looks pleasant. He quotes the example of V.S. Naipaul, who once wrote, I quote, "He was a middle-aged man, comma, with glasses, comma." So here, the comma after middle-aged man might look unnecessary, because otherwise also it makes sense, but that comma is something which is inserted as a part of aesthetic. It is something which Naipaul uses in order to say that the glasses are not actually part of that middle-aged feature, or it is not part of it's not a characteristic feature of the middle age. Finally, as he concludes, he uses a long paragraph to beautifully describe the function of punctuations. He says, "A world that has only periods is a world without inflections. It is a world without shade. It has a music without sharps and flats. It is a martial music, it has a jackboot rhythm. Words cannot bend and curve." So a world without any kind of punctuation is a tasteless world. A world with no punctuation is an expressionless world. Words cannot bend and curve, they will simply have a single meaning with no emotions or no expressions attached to it. He moves on to say, a comma catches the gentle drift of the mind and thought, turning in on itself and back on itself, reversing, redoubling and returning along the course of its own sweet river music. So just like you see in the image, the river which splits into two and then finally rejoins with the original stream, that is how a comma functions. A comma inserted in between a sentence might lead you to a different drift of thought, but it finally leads you, another comma in that same sentence would finally lead you to the original idea of the sentence. Similarly, the semicolon, which brings clauses and thoughts together with all the silent discretion of a hostess arranging guests around her dinner table. Very beautiful image where he says that it's like semicolon is like the hostess which keeps arranging guests around her. So semicolon is something which brings together different ideas and very clearly states that they are different ideas put together in a single sentence. Finally, he says that punctuation is a matter of care. It is a care for words, but also it is a care for what the words imply. For example, the kind of meanings that punctuation carry are so important. It is like a lover observing his or her partner with the minute details. In Pico Iyer's words, I caught him, only a lover notices the small things, the way the afternoon light catches the nape of a neck, or how a strand of hair slips out from behind an ear, or the way a finger curls around a cup. And no one scans a letter so closely as a lover, searching for the small print, straining to hear its nuances, its gasps, its sighs and hesitations, poring over the secret message that lie in every cadence. So, a comma or any punctuation for that matter can let us hear a voice break or a heart. And punctuation, finally he says, is a labor of love which actually brings us back to God. Just like he takes the final image to the comparison he makes in the beginning. He says that they take us back to the gods because that's where everything begins and everything ends. Punctuations are also like that. That is where the sentence begins and sentence ends. Without a punctuation, you never know where a sentence ends. Without a punctuation, you never know when to take a pause, when to take a breath. So it's a labor. It is more or less a labor of love. And that brings us back to God, to the initial image that he used. So basically, here in this essay, he is talking about how important punctuations are, and he uses a lot of analogies and comparisons to elaborate on that particular fact. So please read the text carefully once more, and then we'll have further discussions in our next class. Thank you.